Chief Diaz, thanks so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you for having me.
Last week, you announced the creation of a community violence task force. Is it working?
Yeah, we actually pulled some of our resources to, make sure that we addressed it during the weekend. We actually saw some success during the weekend where we saw a reduction in shootings. But as we get into the summer days, sunnier days, that'll be really where we're pulling all of our resources to make sure that this is fully up and running and functional.
You announced the creation of the task force after the random shooting that occurred in Belltown. It killed Ina Kwan, a pregnant woman, also a local business owner. It caught national headlines. I want to ask you point blank, is the city of Seattle safe?
I believe it is safe, but when you have an incident like that, it feels like, it's not safe. We have to gain that trust back. Going up in the first 5 months, we've seen a reduction, almost 17% reduction in violent crime. People had come to me publicly and said, we feel like it's safer to walk out into the streets. But there was always, still a little bit of hesitation because they felt like things felt safer. But an incident like that is going to make people feel unsafe, and I get that. So for us, building this task force out, making sure we're focused on these areas, we got to regain that trust.
You're acknowledging how people feel, because I did want to ask you about that. It's not just the shooting. We had the random attack of a woman that was hit in the back of the head with a baseball bat. We had the woman that was beaten and thrown down the staircase at a light rail station. And I'm hearing you acknowledge that people do feel unsafe when those seemingly random things occur. But how do you combat random crime like that?
I think that's trying to make sure that we put officers in the right place. In some of those areas that we discussed, the CID, we're working to address the issues around 12th and Jackson, 5th and Jackson, by putting a lot of uniformed patrol. We saw a reduction in shootings in that area. Even in the downtown core, we're seeing a reduction in overall violence. But when you have people that are in crisis, you have people that are using fentanyl, general public that's walking down that street is going to still feel unsafe. And so you want to make sure you reduce the demand for fentanyl. So we've got to be able to educate people, get people into treatment, get into services, and we also have to have accountability. And we got to make sure that our officers are going out, targeting the people that are creating that havoc and creating that harm, and we've got to go out and arrest them. And I think coupled with both of them, it's that balanced approach that we need for the city.
You mentioned putting officers in the right places. And I know that part of this community violence task force aims to do that, focused on 4 different areas in the city. Do you have the manpower to do that?
We're actually, for a short period of time for this summer, I'm pulling every resource that I can possibly pull. And it's going to be very difficult for some of our units, but we're hoping that if we can actually make an impact, it actually reduces some of those officers and detectives' workload. So I'm pulling people from robbery, and I'm pulling people from a variety of different specialty units and that are already focused on the issues of robbery, human trafficking, sales of drugs, and people committing crimes with guns. We're pulling our gun violence reduction unit. We're pulling, some of our other different specialty units from our traffic unit to our SWAT team, and really focusing their efforts on these various 4 specific areas. But when we're able to focus our efforts, we hope that actually creates a reduction in some of our detective workloads. By actually making arrests and getting guns off the streets, that should be reducing robberies. That should be reducing our human trafficking. So it's kind of, you're trying to play with the pieces that you have to try and reduce overall violence.
How many police officers right now are you short in being fully staffed, ideally where you wouldn't have to pull anyone?
About 360 officers, and if that gives you some context, it'd be close to about 3 to 4 precincts that would not have a patrol officer in those precincts. And so that is a significant reduction in our staffing. But officers are already, they're doing more with less, but they're working really hard. They're working a lot of overtime. But we're already making more gun arrests than we've ever made. I mean, we've recovered 629 guns this year, which is more guns than we've ever had in 15 years. So even being short-staffed, our officers are really doing amazing work.
You mentioned that You've recovered more than 600 guns already this year, and one of the issues in this particular shooting at 4th and Lenora was that the suspect had a stolen gun. How big of a problem is that on our streets?
Right now, we actually test every gun and every shell casing to see if it's been used in another case. This gun being stolen out of Lakewood it wasn't in our city. However, we're evaluating to see if that gun has been used in any other cases, or if it's just random how he acquired it. We need to figure out how he acquired it. Could it have been purchased from somebody, or could he have stolen that gun? So those are all still questions that are yet to be answered, but we're still looking into those answers.
Another aspect of this case is he was in crisis, and you've acknowledged that. Your department has said this is someone we knew was having a mental health episode. What do you feel is the department's role in the balance that the department has to strike between being reactive when a crime happens and being a deterrent, I suppose, or to deter crime from happening?
Yeah, so we handle about 11,000 calls for service that are just dealing with people in crisis, and majority of those are not criminal related. In fact, almost I don't know what the percentage is, but I know a large percentage is not actual crime related. However, we have the authority to what we call involuntary treat somebody. That means that we take them and send them up to the hospital for treatment. And that's about 33% of that 11,000 go into treatment at the hospital. And then we actually are trying to get people resources and services. Earlier today, just in this room, we had what we call the Crisis Intervention Committee, which is made up of community partners that work with us to try and address some of the issues that are out on the streets, because it's not just the police department's responsibility. And I would actually say that a good portion of these calls for service, we want to make sure that we get the right people and the right treatment in place.
And when you say you're responding to those mental health crises on the street, is that the officers seeing it with their own two eyes and they're helping that person, or is it a call coming in?
It's both.
Let me give you an example that happened recently. At the King 5 studios, there was a man outside of our studios and was clearly having some sort of episode, perhaps from substance use. And we called 911, and the dispatcher blatantly said that you would not respond unless that person was making threats. But a few of us on the staff were worried that he might walk into incoming traffic, might hurt himself, or be a danger to someone else. But we were told no one's coming. Do you have a response to that? When should people call?
Yeah, so I actually would say to call back again, because we want to make sure that if it is a potential danger to themselves or danger to others, that could meet the criteria for an involuntary treatment, or to try and get people those services. Now we know that it's going to be difficult to respond to every crisis call, but I would say call again. I mean, we want people to give us a call. We're going to try and triage those calls as best we can. We work currently with the 911 dispatch center. It's not in our department, but we work with the dispatch center to make sure that we're responding to those types of calls for service.
In your press conference, when you announced the Community Violence Task Force, you did say we are prioritizing human life. And I don't think anyone would argue with you on that prioritization. But certainly, you also mentioned having to pull resources and perhaps not being able to respond to every single type of call, for example, property damage. Yeah. But what do you say to, say, a business owner in downtown Seattle who is seeing their business damaged in some sort of way, a window broken, graffiti, public urination in front of it, you name it, and that's their livelihood?
We're still going to be investigating that. What we do is we ask people to do online reporting, so that way it puts a case in the queue. We actually do what we call our telephone reporting unit, or what our true unit is. So we're going to still be able to capture those incidents and be able to still put those cases together. And if there is a pattern or practice that we actually can be able to determine who's doing that, hopefully that could lead to arrest. But we also have to be able to make sure that we triage a lot of this, because at the end of the day, to those business owners, we want to make sure that they're capturing that information so we can be able to put our officers in the right areas. but I do have to focus really heavily on life. And that is the shootings, that is the robberies, which affect those small businesses.
We often tell people, see something, say something, but there is a sentiment in Seattle right now with people that if you do call police on certain types of crime, you may not show up, at least not right away. Maybe you'll follow up on it on later days, but if my car gets broken into, maybe an officer won't show up. So what crimes are you prioritizing? What should people know about when calling 911, on which things to call for and which ones you might not have the resources to respond to right away?
Yeah, and actually I would encourage people to call either our non-emergency line, the non-emergency line, or 911, and they'll direct them based on the information that they provide. They'll direct them to online reporting, or they'll direct them to our true unit, our telephone reporting unit, where they can still make a report for car prowls, for sometimes low-level burglaries, things that it might take an officer a long period of time to respond to. In fact, right now I'm actually revamping our online reporting system because I think I need to make it much more user-friendly, and I want to make sure that we're responsive to many different languages.
Give me a sense of how recruitment is going. You said you're about 300 officers short of being ideally fully staffed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, right now, our recruiting effort, number one is retaining people. We lost so many officers over the last 3 years, close to about 550, about 550 officers, and that has created a huge a risk for our officers. But we've also hired a significant amount of officers as well. But as we retain officers, we've actually, last year we had lost close to 90 officers at this time. We're actually about 40 officers less than that this year. So we're doing really good on retaining people. When we're hiring, we're actually hiring more people than we did last year. And but unfortunately, we're breaking even with the amount of people that have lost to the amount of people that we've hired. And you want to be above that because you want to bring new people in.
So you said you're breaking even now. It sounds like you're at least moving in the right direction, but what does it take to recruit more and have that tipping point? Why do you think you are having some trouble recruiting?
Across the country, I think policing is as a profession is having trouble recruiting.
We have a couple big events coming up. This weekend is the Seattle Pride Parade and Seattle Pride, and then next month we have the MLB All-Star Game. What is your department doing to prepare for these big events that bring a lot of tourists in?
Pride has always been a big event over the last several years, and we staff it across the whole route. We'll have officers, actively engage the community throughout that whole route, and it's actually one of the funner events for our officers. And then we look at MLB All-Star, and we have had big events as much as in 2001 when we had the All-Star game, but we also have had, the playoffs. So we've already planned for events that are this magnitude. The unfortunate thing is it's sustained over several days, and so it's also trying to make sure that you have the staffing over the several days, and that's what we're planning for, is making sure that all the venues are covered, all the venues have the amount of staffing that is needed to make those areas safe, but also trying to still keep the pathways for downtown safe.
I want to follow up with you on Seattle Pride. This year, for the second year, police officers will not be allowed to march in uniform. How do you feel about that?
I'm disappointed, and it's hard for our officers that have some of our LGBTQ officers and as well as our professional staff, because this department has several hundred people that would identify as LGBTQ, and it's disappointing for them to not be able to be who they are and also be in the profession that they are. They're trying to make a difference. They're trying to show the community that this is a job that they can aspire to. And we're one of the few departments that probably has the most transgender officers in the entire country. And it's something to be proud of. And I think that you want to make sure that officers feel valued and respected. And when they don't feel valued and respected from their own community, that is really tough.
Despite your disappointment, do you understand why they made that decision?
I think that we all have to understand that, why some people would make a decision that feels like, well, the department, in the police department, there has created harm in the community in the past. That's the reason why Pride started from Stonewall. But we also have to recognize the amount of inroads that have actually been done over the years. So, we've done our LGBTQ Advisory Council. We have worked tirelessly on a lot of different efforts to from transgender issues to having our first policy in that, to the SPD Safe Place initiative. There's so many things that we've done, and that's because of the officers that are coming in this department that are saying this is important to me, and they should be recognized for that as well.
Speaking of working in conjunction, do you feel like you have the support of the mayor and the city council?
Yeah, I've been working very exclusively with the mayor on a lot of these initiatives, and I think he's recognized that we've seen actually a reduction in some of the violent crime, but we have more roads to tackle. We have more issues to tackle, and it's not just the police department. It's trying to get all of our different departments and also other agencies to help us out.
The city council recently struck down the drug use in public law that was proposed. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, right now we're working, the mayor announced a work group. We're hoping to put together within a very short period of time the legislation that, both honors people getting services and addresses their needs, but also having some level of accountability for us to have a tool that sometimes we need to enforce open air drug usage as well. And we want to balance that out. And so we're hopefully within a very short period of time can put something forward to the city council for them to vote on.
Do you have enough money to do everything that you want to do?
It's a struggle. I think, even just some of our officer overtime, trying to make sure that, that we're keeping this area safe. We have to staff it with extra officers. And, sometimes that is taking away some of the money that we could have spent on some of the tools and equipment that we want to. And you also don't want to burn your officers out. By working them too much, they're burning out, but they're doing everything they can to make sure the city is safe. And I think, we'll work with the city council, we'll work with the mayor's office to make sure that we meet our budget. Let
me end with this. Solving crime in Seattle feels like an impossible task. How do you wake up and go to work every day?
It's funny. Sometimes I feel like I don't sleep. I think chiefs across the country will say Seattle and Portland are some of the toughest jobs to be the police chief. But honestly, I have good people that are working and doing the job, and I give them the credit that they deserve. They're working hard, and we're going to continue to work hard to make sure the city's safe.